Everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 526. Today we're going to take a look at Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. So this is the newest game in the Pandemic line. So it kind of uses the similar system to base Pandemic, but it definitely does make some mechanical changes, and obviously the theme of it has changed quite a bit. So players are investigators trying to close 4 gates. And so instead of curing 4 diseases, you're trying to close these 4 different gates. It all takes place in these various towns, so Arkham, Innsmouth, Dunwich, and so on. And you are going to be dealing with cultists and shoggoths, which are like these sort of medium-sized demons. And then also the old ones are going to exert their presence over everything. And finally, you may actually reveal Cthulhu, at which point you've lost the game. So let's go ahead and jump into how it looks and how it works. And the reason I mentioned looks is because the presentation and the art of this game actually is really well done. So I just want to make a mention of that now. But then we'll talk about my review at the end. Just wanted to do a quick component mention before I get into the mechanics of the game. Here's the box cover, of course. And then we have the rule book here, which is a very nice kind of obfuscated sort of illustration there, and the illustrations and the design of the rulebook itself is actually pretty nice too. It is actually very easy to follow and read. Maybe some of that has to do with having played Pandemic a whole bunch, but it is very nicely laid out. So I'm glad they kind of took the extra care in terms of the presentation. They certainly did mail it in. There's a couple of examples, and there's nice sort of details, and they call them the fine points here, just sort of further explanations of some different cards and effects and things. I'll show you the board, of course, in a second. And then it's kind of a nice, almost over-the-top insert. We've got spaces for each of your investigator minis here. So I think they have sort of painters in mind. So if you wanted to do a really nice job on these miniatures, you can kind of leave them in their own little compartment there. And then here we have the Shoggoth minis. And these are sort of generic demons, but these are really funky shaped and everything. And I do kind of like the teal color here. And then you've got other components. You've got this nice sort of translucent die. This is the sanity die, which you'll be rolling. But let's go ahead and set the game up. So here's the board, and you can see we've got 4 separate towns: Arkham, Innsmouth, Kingsport, and Dunwich. If we kind of zoom over here to Arkham and Dunwich, you can see these have different colors here. So Arkham's got green, Dunwich is in yellow, and you can see the gate in Arkham and the gate here in Dunwich that you're trying to close. And you go ahead and take these 4 gate tokens here, and then as you close them, you'll mark them off here. And then that gate will be closed and no longer accessible for any of the old ones or whatever to come through. Speaking of the old ones, we have this deck of cards here with a variety of old ones. Now you're always going to put Cthulhu here face down up in this spot right there. So if you ever reveal Cthulhu up there, then the game is over. Then you're going to take and shuffle the rest of these up and then go ahead and lay these out here on these various slots. And various things during the course of the game will actually reveal these. And these are going to have various bad effects that hinder the investigators during the game. So as an example here, if we were to reveal Dagon, you will place 1 cultist on each gate location. That's a one-time effect. Or has Neurolith, it says investigators may no longer do the use gate action. So this has got a little infinity symbol, and that means that it's always on effect. And then here, just another example here is Zazoth. He has removed 3 cultists from the unused supply. And so you're going to have these cultists here coming out onto the board, and think of these sort of like the disease cubes in Pandemic. And if you ever have to put one of these on the board and there's nothing to put on the board, then that's one way for the players to lose the game. So I've talked about one way to win the game, that's close all 4 gates. I talked about 2 ways to lose the game, that's revealing Cthulhu. The other one is running out of the cultists. Another way to lose the game is to have placed all your Shoggoths and have to place another one. That's another way to lose the game. If you go through the player deck of cards, which I'll explain in a minute, without winning the game, then you're going to lose. These cards will be shuffled up and put face down here. There's a little bit of a makeup to how you do this in terms of how you see the deck, which I'll explain in a minute. And the last way for players to lose is if they go insane. So let's just pretend we're playing a 3-player game here. I'll take these 3 minis out, and then we're going to put these fellas here onto the train station spot. So all these folks here just arrived, and they're ready to do some investigating. Now each player will also take a roll card. So you've got the magician, the hunter, the occultist, the detective, the reporter, and driver and so on. And this number here is going to show you the number of actions that you get on a turn. This is usually 4, but the doctor gets 5. And then you have a little special ability here. Now players are also going to take 4 of these sanity tokens, and they're going to have them. So once you lose all 4 of these, then you're going to be insane, at least temporarily, and you're going to flip over the card, and you're going to be down in action, and you lose that action immediately if this happens in the middle of your turn. So in this case, you'd be down to 3 actions, and then your special roll ability will change, sometimes in interesting ways. So it'll basically be the same sort of thematic roll, but you'll be slightly hindered and so on. So you're going to take 1 roll card for each of the players, and then we're going to take a little player aid card here. This shows you all the actions that you can do, and then on the back here it talks about the sanity die, when you must roll the die, and so on, and what happens with going insane and regaining sanity. So the next part of setup is to shuffle this summoning deck. We'll go ahead and put that here, and similar to Pandemic, you'll flip 2 cards off the top. And then these 2 locations here will get 3 of these cultists. So we were dealt out the church and farmstead. So we'll put 3 here at the church and then 3 here at the farmstead, like so. We'll do 2 more cards off the deck, and we'll put 2 cultists, 2 at the wharf, 2 at the police station. So 2 down here at the wharf and 2 down here at the police station. And then finally 2 more cards, and then we'll do 1 cultist at each of these locations. And we'll discard those into the discard pile for that deck. And then we're going to shuffle up the player deck here, and you can see these just match the town name. So there's all the green Arkhams, the blue Innsmouth, and so on. We're going to take a certain number of relics based on the number of players, and these are kind of like your special action cards. You're going to shuffle these into this deck, and then you're going to deal 3 cards to each player in case of a 3-player game, but that's going to vary. And then you're going to leave the rest of the relics that you didn't shuffle in off to the side here. Players can get at these in some ways that I'll show you. Then after you've dealt all the players the cards, then we're going to divide this into 4 equal piles, or relatively equal piles, and then shuffle into each of those piles this Evil Stirs card. And then this will trigger some different nasty effects in the game when these are pulled. Now the turn flow is very similar to traditional Pandemic. Each player is going to take 4, maybe 5 or less actions, and then you're going to draw 2 cards here off the player deck, add them to your hand. They've always got a hand limit of 7 cards. You can't go above that. You've got to discard immediately if you would. And then you're going to reveal summoning cards, and this is going to bring out more of the cultists. But let's talk about the actions first. So one thing you could do is you could actually just walk and move 1 adjacent spot here. So you could go from point to point to point, and that would be 1 action for each movement. Now let's say you were here at the diner, and this is actually a bus location. So each town has a different bus location that you can go to. Now if you discard a card at this location, you can move to that town. So if we're at this bus location, we can discard the Dunwich card to move immediately down here to the Dunwich bus station. Now if we were in Dunwich, we could discard the Dunwich card to move to any of the other towns' bus locations. Now let's say we were at a gate. If you're at a gate, you can move to any other town's gate location. So we can immediately move way up here to the blue gate location all the way up here. But you have to roll a sanity die anytime you do that. I'll explain the sanity die in a minute, but there's several things that are going to trigger that, and I'll explain those as we go. Now, if you are at a location with some cultists, you can use one of your actions to remove a cultist. So removing both of these would cost 2 actions. If you are at a location with a Shoggoth, it will cost you 3 actions. You got to spend all 3 of those actions, and then you can remove this. Now the thing to know about the Shoggoth is if you ever move into its location or it moves into your location, you've also got to roll the sanity die. But when you defeat a Shoggoth, you can go here and draw the top card off of the relic deck that we left at the side of the board at the beginning of the game. So you can use the slaying of the Shoggoth to get you some cool special power. Now, these cards can be played anytime, so they can be played on other players' turns. There's actually an old one that prevents that, so you can only play it on your turn, but most of the time you can only play these, or you can always play these on anybody's turn. However, whenever you play one of these, again, you have to roll the sanity die. Next, you can trade cards with a player. Now, if you are at the same location as a player, you can always trade or take, actually, a single relic card. You can also trade or take a card matching that city. So here we're in Arkham, so we can give or take for a single action an Arkham card. Now finally, if we are at a gate location here, you can discard 5 of the cards matching that town, and then you can then seal that gate off. And then when you do, you get to move 1 cultist from each location in that town. So I could take 1 cultist from each of these locations and get rid of it. If you've done your 4 actions, you'll then of course draw 2 cards off the top of this deck and add them to your hand. Again, you have a hand limit of 7 cards. But if you draw one of these Evil Stirs cards, then you're in for some badness. So the first thing you're going to do here is roll the sanity die. So let's talk about sanity die real quick. Now when you roll the sanity die, you've got a couple of options. You've got a blank face, which is good. You have these sides here, which will cause you to discard 1 of your sanity tokens. And then you've got a side here that will allow you, or force you to discard 2. And then you have this icon here, which will force you to push 2 cultists onto whatever location you're at. You can regain your sanity completely when you seal a gate. So when you seal a gate, you get all your sanity back, and then you get to go to the church or the hospital. It's your choice. And the church is right here in Dunwich. Hospital is way over here in Innsmouth, right up there. Now the next step is to do an awakening, and this is revealing the next old one. Now there's another way that an awakening will happen. I'll get to that in a minute. But you go ahead and reveal this here, and then this will contribute some horrible effect that will make the game harder. The other thing to notice here is you see the summoning rating here. So you've got 2, 2, and then all the way up here we've got 3, 3, and so on. That's the amount of summoning cards that you're going to deal after we get done with this step. So just keep that in mind. It always starts at 2 and then stays at 2 for a while and gets progressively worse. Now the next 2 steps have to do with the summoning deck, so we'll do those in order here. So a Shoggoth will appear, and then the cultists will regroup. Players of Pandemic will be very familiar with this step. Shoggoth will now appear because you're going to take the bottom card here of this deck, and then now a Shoggoth will appear in the junkyard. Just over here, we'll go ahead and put a Shoggoth out there. And then the final step of the Evil Stirs card is to take all of the cards here on the summoning discard pile, shuffle them, and then of course put them immediately right back on top of the summoning deck. Then we're going to again check the summoning rate there and draw that many cards. So to start the game, we're just going to draw 2 here. So we'll draw these off, and then we're going to add now a cultist to, in this case, the church and the wharf. Go ahead and add 1 to the church here for the example. Now let's say we were to go and add a 4th summoning cultist here. Now in traditional Pandemic you have what's called an outbreak. Does not happen. You will never place the 4th cultist here, but now you're going to trigger another awakening. So up here we're going to reveal the next old one up here. So you don't want to let those build up still. There's not going to be an outbreak, but they're going to sort of form a little circle here and then summon an old one. The last thing to notice about these summoning cards, see if I can find one here. This one here at the swamp, it has a little Shoggoth symbol there at the bottom. And anytime you draw one of these, it's going to tell the Shoggoths that are on the board to move towards the nearest gate. In this case, we've just got the 1 Shoggoth here. It's 1, 2, 3 spaces away from the gate in Arkham, and then 1, 2 spaces away from the gate in the hospital. If it's an equidistant amount, the players can choose which way it moves. In this case, it's going to move here. Now, if he ever gets to the gate, is triggered to move again, then it's going to come off the board and escape back into the nether regions. Also worth noting that if the gate has been closed, then the Shoggoth of course is not going to move towards it because it's closed. Pretty much all the rules to the game. A couple other points. I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier, but if all of the investigators are insane at the same time, that's another way that the players will lose. The other thing is the back of these gate tokens here are normally on the X side, but if you flip them over to the Elder Sign side, that can be done by playing this Elder Sign relic. And only in that case will it prevent these spawning of more cultists or Shoggoths even in that particular town. They're still going to come out unless you play that Elder Sign card. So that is Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. I actually really enjoyed this game. I was a little bit sort of, I guess you say jaded because it's Pandemic and Cthulhu, and so Pandemic is, you know, maybe one of the most popular games of the last 10 years, and Cthulhu is obviously overused. But the changes that they made to the game were really smart, and a lot of times they were really funny. So overall, the game is probably a little bit easier, I guess, than regular Pandemic, maybe a little bit simpler. The board is not as daunting. There's not as lot of, interconnections and trying to get from here. And, if I circle down here and pick these up on the way down here and build a trading post or whatever, and then I go through here, there's not really that much of that spatial stuff happening. And you also have the much simpler cards because you just have, blue cards and yellow cards. You don't really need exact cards. So the hand management part of it is somewhat less, but the timing is still important because you have these cool special abilities that you've got and cool special effects from the relics cards, and you've got to really try to figure out or try to guess at when is the right time to play those, because a lot of those things are really going to require you to roll that sanity die. So if you move through a gate, if you run into a Shoggoth, if you play one of the relic cards, you've got to roll a sanity die. And at the beginning, you're kind of, yeah, whatever, I'll roll a sanity die and, lose a sanity here or there. But as you kind of move along, it's kind of an interesting decision to even go insane in some ways. Because you're like, well, if you look at the back of this card, I'm not that, it's not that much of a hindrance if I'm insane, which is kind of funny. Incidentally, one of the funniest ones is the driver who can move 2 spaces if he wants on his move action. And when he becomes insane, he has to move 2 spaces, I guess, because he's just driving all over the place. But that's actually really interesting because he interacts with one of the old ones in a cool way where he can kind of like ignore that rule because he's driving and not walking. So there's a lot of those really kind of cool interactions and stuff in the game in terms of like how it affects the mechanics. It's very much like a push your luck kind of thing where you're like, okay, well, we've got this guy out. I've got this ability that will negate that ability, or maybe we'll skip the summoning step or whatever. And so you're really trying to just play by the seat of your pants a little bit and then kind of go with the flow. And so it's a little bit simpler in that sense because there's not really as much to sort of absorb sort of from the basic game or the base of the game. But once you have these kind of powers all in play, then it becomes a little bit more to deal with. But that kind of actually slowly evolves over the game. So that's actually kind of a nice thing, I think, for maybe somebody that had never even played Pandemic before or was kind of newer to co-ops. That could be kind of fun because you're like, you move around doing your basic stuff, and then like boom, your first old one comes out, and then you've got to deal with the sanity roll and the shock. Then it gets more crazy and complex as the game goes along, and then it'll come down to some really fun moments. As the game evolves, we've only got 2 more old ones to flip over, and so on. So that extra little bit of luck, I think, is important here. And I like the changes that they've made here. So I think if you're a fan of Pandemic, like a super fan, then you've probably got this pre-ordered or whatever already. And if you did not like Pandemic, and I know there's people out there that don't like Pandemic. I wasn't really the biggest fan. I love Pandemic Legacy, obviously. That game is ridiculous. But I think if you weren't a huge fan of Pandemic, you might still like this. I don't know. It depends on why you didn't like Pandemic for some reason. Most people like Pandemic, but if you're one of those sort of on the fence about it, you might still like this one because to me it's a little bit easier. It's a little more of a gateway kind of thing than even Pandemic, I know, but I think there's a certain kind of charm to this one that it doesn't take itself very seriously. The interactions and the different effects really do work well together. So I think you might get a kick out of that. So anyway, definitely take a look at this one. Again, the production is really well done and the art's great. Art on all the old ones is really nice. You could paint the minis if you really want. The minis are decent, especially for this style of game. So I definitely recommend this game. Thanks.